Welcome everybody at the Legal Tech panel of the Arzboni Legal Fest. I hope you are enjoying all the programs. Now we are here with Andrea Miskolczi, the founder of InterAlia Consulting, and Daniel Porus, the Chief Commercial Officer of Legatics. And we will have a super interesting discussion about legal tech. I am super happy to be here with two practicing people who really do legal tech, because we talk a lot about it everywhere, but a few people does it in reality, in practice. So welcome, Andrea and Daniel. And since we only have 1 hour, I would like to start with the questions. First, I would like to ask with a warm-up question. Just can you tell us about your starts, how your career evolved, how you ended up in this career in legal tech, what led you to this role?
Maybe I start. So thank you, and thank you for being part of this discussion. I'm happy to be here tonight. So my background, I started as a lawyer myself. I started with Clifford Chance in Budapest. I think now it's Lakatos and Köves Partners law firm. And then I moved to Linklaters, which is now the Kinsteller office or firm. And I was a practicing lawyer without any clue about tech, and especially legal tech. I don't think the term existed in those days, for approximately 10 years. And then I moved for various reasons away from practicing law and more closer to business management, and spent then here in Vienna. I'm based now in Vienna. Spent 12 years with Wolf Theis, and that's where I met legal tech. Not at the very beginning. I started with business development, marketing, training, and then approximately 2016, step by step, this field became my favorite business management subject. And then 2020, I moved from Wolf Theis to Dentons, and was the Europe Director of Innovation with the firm. Of course, that was 100% focus on legal tech and legal project management, legal innovation. And that's where we met with Daniel, where we implemented Legatics and shared some exciting months together onboarding the tool. And it was all everything good, but I was always interested in, okay, how is it to be your own boss? Not that I had bad bosses, but and 2 years ago approximately, I decided to found InterAlia Consulting, and I work with law firms, legal departments, actually not only in connection with legal tech, but also in connection with business strategy, a little bit of marketing, change management as well. So that's my story.
So I'll jump in as well. Also delighted to be here, so thank you very much for having me. I started out my career as a corporate M&A lawyer. So I practiced for about 6 years in New Zealand and then in Australia. My journey into legal tech was largely driven by how frustrated I was day to day with how manual and administrative so much of the work was that I was doing. It was a time I was coming into practice in 2010, and as I was progressing with my career, it felt like I was seeing all this innovation happening in all these other industries. There was a big wave of fintech happening, and I sort of felt, okay, you've just got to deal with this as a junior lawyer. This is part of what being a junior lawyer is, and it will get better as you evolve. But I was struck 6 years into private practice, just that it's mad that I'm still doing these things, charging out hundreds of dollars an hour to do things that frankly could be done in a much more effective way. I started exploring areas outside of purely the law to get involved in. And whenever I approached companies to get involved with them, I kept getting redirected to be, in-house counsel roles. And I said, no, I want to do the business side of things. So I ended up moving to the UK, and I went to business school. And rather coincidentally, this was in 2016, 2017, there was a massive wave of legal technology happening at the time, particularly in the UK, and quite specifically at at and around Cambridge University, which is where I was studying. So at the time, companies like Luminance were in their very early days. I think there were about 5 people at the time. Also Thought River was based there. And a small company, just a few people at the time, Wavelength, which has subsequently been acquired by Simmons & Simmons. So all of this was happening in and around where I was studying. And I thought at the time I might actually want to move away from legal altogether and get more involved in big tech, but got very excited about what was happening, particularly in the UK. So met with a number of founders and CEOs at the time, wrote a research project on the topic, and got introduced indirectly to Anthony, who had founded Legatics at the time. And it just spoke so much to the frustrations that I'd felt as a transactional lawyer, and what was really needed in the industry sort of at that time. So I teamed up with Anthony in 2017 to bring the Legatics product to market. So that was my entree into legal technology.
Thank you. So both your journeys are super complex. You all started as lawyers and then tried the business direction and after the tech. And that's so great. It is like very complex backgrounds. And it seems like that you also have very complex works right now. So I would be interested, can you tell us about how a typical day of you look like? I mean, how is your day like in legal tech?
Shall I start maybe? How a typical day in legal tech looks like. So I work as a consultant. So for example, this morning I had a conversation with one of the project teams at one of my clients. It's a bank, and we are planning an on-site workshop here in Vienna where we will test 3 different tools which would help the team to manage matters. So basically we discuss how the workshops would look like, what kind of use cases we would like to push. Then I might speak, for example, with another client in connection with a business strategy project, people and talent challenges at law firms, because I mentioned it's not only legal tech what I do. I might speak with conference organizers in connection with speaking opportunities or invitations. So of course, that's also big in legal tech, that there are a lot of conferences, especially now, May, June, but also in the autumn. That's also a frequent. What I don't do, Bori, which might be a typical legal tech role, is actually at the moment I don't do any specific implementation. So for that, I'm as a consultant firm, I'm working on building the team and offering that. But at the moment, I'm not. So InterAlia is not automating documents for clients yet, not implementing solutions as an outside consultant like Legatics yet. And so on and so forth. So that's something which a typical legal tech consultant would also do, but for that you need people, and that's what I'm working on. When I was in a law firm, that was all about, like, for example, Dentons and Wolf Ties. The legal tech work was all about creating your strategy, your roadmap, getting the budget, fighting for the budget, and then maybe doing or typically doing a selection, scouting process, picking up the tools, testing them, and then onboarding them, info security, data privacy reviews, and so on, and then rolling them out, and different adoption strategies. So that would be not at Dentons and Wolf Ties, that wouldn't be a one-man show work. Of course, it's a team that does that type of technology. But this is how I would summarize what I do these days and what I did at law firms in the on the other side of the projects.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, I think the nature of working at a startup and now scale up is it does change a lot and regularly, and as such, my day-to-day does continue to evolve quite regularly, and it has changed a lot from the early days. So if I think back to the very early days, when I first teamed up with Anthony and we were bringing the product to market, it was very much about, we believed that this was a solution that needed to be in the world, but did other people feel the same way? So it was a lot of, frankly, hustling to get relevant meetings with people who may be interested, and thinking about how you go about doing that. So it was trying to get warm introductions where possible, cold calls, and then there was a lot of pitching to try and get the buy-in from relevant people. And ultimately, it was about proving out that product market fit. So, you do start to get the yeses from people. People bring the solution in, and then the focus was a little more on the implementations and the rollouts. And as more and more of my time was required on the implementations and rollouts, building out a team for that, while then building out a team to continue that kind of hustling and getting out there in front of other potentially interested parties. So that sort of product market fit has continued to evolve. You then get in a successful implementation. Was that just luck, or was that a one-off, or can you prove that you can get that successful implementation happening at multiple firms? So as that's continued to evolve, growing out a sales function, a marketing function, an existing business function as well. So I now spend more of my time overseeing and empowering and supporting those teams, versus I still do a bit of it day to day. But what I also do is I sit on the boards. We've taken investment, and there's quite a, we have meetings that will be looking more longer term about, what are our requirements? Do we take on further funding to accelerate our, our ambitions and what we're wanting to build from a product perspective? Where is the product going? So some of those more sort of strategic questions. I'm also heavily proactively involved in exploring new markets that we're expanding into. So, for example, I just spent the last 2 months in the US, which is a big market that we're doing a lot more in at the moment. So, yeah, that's just an example of how the day-to-day is sort of continuing to evolve.
Thank you. This is super interesting, and thanks, Andrea, for sharing both your life in Dentons and as a consultant, because this is amazing that our audience can see how different type of roles in different type of companies can look like in legal tech. So this was super insightful. And legal tech is also very broad in terms of technologies. It covers a lot of things. So can you tell us about what technology do you work with?
Basically, I would say that the main type of technologies, of course, these days, generative AI is a big topic. So tools, questions in connection with that is absolutely a hot topic. But I like the fact that my work is not only about that, but also other type of technologies. So project management platforms, no-code, low-code solutions, document automation as well is what I work with. Basically, that those are the areas where we work together with the clients, whether they need those technologies and what they have to do to make the most return on their investments.
And I suppose from our perspective, obviously our primary platform is a transaction management platform. That's the one that we're going out to market with. But as a company ourselves, we do work with a lot of technology, and I think some of that does have applicability to sort of how other people may think about what the entree into legal technology as well. So some of the primary places that we live and technologies we use are things like Salesforce, which are customer relationship management tools to help keep track of conversations that you're having, your prospects, your existing customers. It's really important to us to keep careful track of product feedback that we're getting from both prospects and from existing customers. How does that vary by region? So we use a tool called Product Board to track all of that, and it helps our product team to prioritize what we end up developing based on what's being requested the most, what people value, the most, and helps to guide the product direction. Internal communications are really important. So we personally use Slack, but others would use Teams. It's very common, now within the law firms, for example, to be using the Microsoft Suite and Teams as part of that. As a company, we use the Google Suite internally for our email and for internal video. Andrea mentioned, the AI tools. I do find myself using. We've got AI embedded in a lot of the solutions that we do have that we use. So it helps to summarize, for example, meetings that we take with the permission of those involved. But it's very helpful for then summarizing, the content of what's been involved in a particular meeting. But I do find myself using ChatGPT a lot in my day-to-day work as well. I find it very useful preparing for meetings. So if I'm heading off to meet with someone I haven't met before, actually just asking, what do you know about that person? And it summarizes, I find, quite accurately. If anyone wants to test it, ask what they know about yourself and see how accurate it is. I've been quite impressed with it. I found it very useful if you're demoing to a large group of people. You can actually copy and paste all the attendees and it will give you their backgrounds and you have a bit of a sense as to who you're popping into a meeting with. It's fantastic for summarizing notes, for doing research for presentations and talks. And I found, particularly if I'm having to do, content, thought leadership, blogs or LinkedIn posts, it's very good for that as well. So these are some of the examples of where I'm sort of finding some of the uses of AI in the day-to-day that I'm doing as well.
Thank you. And both of you mentioned AI. And anyway, I also think that it is not possible to forget it nowadays. So how do you see the role of AI in the legal industry?
I think AI is definitely something that I would describe as a wake-up call for the industry. So I don't know, Daniel, whether you would agree with me, but I have seen an increased attention, not only in connection with AI, but also in general with legal tech from law firms and legal departments. And definitely the fact that this is that language models, it's in the name, they are dealing with language, and we lawyers, we work with language. We interpret text, we create text, we argue with language, and so on and so forth. It's a very impactful technology for our profession. There is a little bit of hype, I think, or kind of not like a hype. Maybe the expectations are overheated, although maybe you would say that that's exactly hype. But I think it's inevitable that it is a very important, strategically important technology, and people and law firms and legal departments should think long term in connection in connection with generative AI. Mm-hmm.
I definitely agree, Andrea. I think what it's done for legal tech generally has been incredibly significant. I think the level of engagement we've seen from senior partners within law firms who are really waking up to, what is this going to mean for the future of my practice, for the future of the firm? They're being asked by their clients and they need to have an answer as to how to respond. And that is in turn getting them to turn more and more to the experts within their organizations, the IT teams, the innovation teams. And I think it's really helped to support more investment into technology more generally within law firms. I do, however, also very much agree with Andrea that the expectations of what AI can do are maybe just a little ahead of its capabilities. It's moving very, very quickly, and there are some really fantastic use cases already, but I think there's been a lot of experimentation happening over the last couple of years. There are some really fantastic use cases that have emerged. So it's very good for doing things like legal research. It has to be checked. You need to, make sure that the sources are correct. And, there've been those cases that have emerged where, the AI tools have made up case law. So, you do need to be mindful of it, but it is very good for doing that primary legal research, very good for summarization. It's also really good for the things that aren't the strictly legal work, but, you know, drafting of emails, the supporting doing business development, thought leadership pieces. You know, I used to spend a ton of time as a junior lawyer having to pull together research notes and do thought leadership for our team on new legislation that's come out, and just being able to do some of that faster and more effectively, I think is really significant. But the reality is you still need to think of a lot of these AI tools as like a really smart, you know, junior or assistant, but all its work needs to be checked. It can make mistakes, it can completely make stuff up. So I think that's sort of where we are at the moment, but it undoubtedly is, you know, having a huge impact, and I think really supporting legal tech more generally.
And I think it's also important that it's not something like magic that you just buy and implement and then everything is good. But as you also mentioned, you have to understand the limitations. You have to understand how you work against those limitations. So the typical or the classic sentence is: the better the data it was trained on, or you subsequently give access to, the better the results will be. So it's not only a technological question, but also a knowledge management question, whether you have your documents, your data ready to be leveraged by AI. And it's also a business strategy question, because at the end of the day, it looks like it is going to impact, it might impact the entire business model of law firms and the operational model of legal departments. So that's why I'm saying that overheated expectations on the short term and maybe not enough attention yet on the long term potential and effects. There is this famous saying, like, we overestimate the 2 years impact and we underestimate the 10 years impact. I think all of us have seen this quote in the last few years.
Yeah, thank you. So we will see. I have the same feeling about the expectations towards AI, but it is really interesting what you mentioned, that AI was raising interest in other legal technologies. And I would like to also talk about these other technologies then have, what do you think, what is the most impactful in your practice? Which technology? Which is not AI, I mean.
I mentioned that I used to be a lawyer, so my answer will be a typical lawyer's answer. It depends. It depends. It depends on your problems. It depends on your business, because I always say, don't start with the technology, don't start with the tool, but start with looking at your business. What are my main practice areas? Where do I make the most money? What are the challenges in connection with this area? Maybe I have price pressure. Maybe the competition has increased, so I have to be more attractive from a client experience point of view. Maybe my main challenge is talent, you know, like attracting and retaining talent. So I might think about whether I want to be competitive with offering like a different working environment. So it's important that the better you invest, the more time you invest in these questions, in these strategic questions, the better you can then create a strategy and select the tools which are impactful. So there is no universal, you know, answer.
I would, yeah, I'd love to be disagreeing with Andrea more, but I do very much agree as well. I think it depends as to the point that Andrea was making. If you're a law firm that does 90% litigation work, you're maybe not going to be thinking about bringing in a transaction management platform as your top priority. Maybe the 10% of the work that you do is, you know, super profitable and you need a solution for it, in which case, yeah, maybe. But you're probably going to prioritize some of the tools that are more focused around litigation. Maybe it's e-discovery, maybe it's other tools that are going to be really helpful. It also can depend on the segment of the market that you operate in. The reality I've found spending time in the US is, the really big firms, frankly, just don't face as much fee pressure as, some of the smaller firms. And there might not be that same impetus. So to Andrea's point about look at your business, maybe their driver is not going to be so much the profitability side of things, but how do we attract and retain the best talent? So what's going to be the technology that drives that as an outcome, not so much the efficiency driver. That might be the case if you're doing a lot of highly repeatable, less profitable work. That might be more of a driver for bringing in automation tools like a doc automation or transaction management or some of the others. The other thing I'd also add is part of it depends on the sophistication that the firm already has regarding technology. I mean, it's all good and well to then get really excited about bringing in something, really complicated. But if the firm doesn't already have, a basic document management system in place, maybe they should look at doing some of the, the baseline things first and get those in order before looking at some of the secondary ones. But I don't know, Andrea, maybe you've got some thoughts on that, given the law firms that you've operated in.
Absolutely, the maturity in connection with technology in general, so not only legal technology, but the general philosophy in connection with technology, and the opportunities or possibilities and limitations in connection with building a team who looks after the tech portfolio. There are several tools out there which are so easy to use that you don't have to build a big team and to support, to train, and to do the first level support line. But that's why it's important to analyze first strategically what I have already, what are my possibilities, and decide on the basis of that. And at the end of the day, it's there are many impactful tools and technologies, but at the end of the day, it's altogether the return on investment that you have to consider. There are some tools which are very impactful, but maybe they are difficult to implement, or maybe they are expensive to implement. And then it's completely okay, or maybe it's much better to look for something, at least as a first step, which is easier to implement, cheaper to implement, and start with that. There is nothing worse than creating expectations within a firm or a team, big PowerPoints and speeches about legal tech, and then something which is coming very slowly to the actual working environment of the people, difficult to use, doesn't work really well, and so on. So maybe step by step is in some cases easier to be successful with.
Thank you. So the main thing which can answer the question is actually the business rationality, and it leads us to the adaptation, which is an important question in legal tech, because there is a lot of noise about that, how conservative lawyers are and how risk-averse and how they are resisting all the change. How do you see the adaptation side?
I'm not so judgmental in connection with lawyers. First of all, we are trained to focus on the risks, right? So if you are a lawyer and two people come to you that they have agreed to do a business together, your task is to think about what can go wrong. Okay, so or one of your tasks when you think about the contract. So I think it's completely understandable why we lawyers focus on the risks. The second that people sometimes forget is that the liability of in this profession is a very special one, and I'm not very judgmental in connection with partners who built up a practice in like 20 years developed client relationships over many, many years, that they are cautious with that. And they don't want to just, risk and for not knowing whether they should do. So I don't like those sentences when people talk about failure culture in a law firm. I don't think failure culture as an expression fits to the law firm business model and the professional liability. And people can lose their they can lose their profession in a very extreme situation, and that's not something that we should forget. Having said that, of course, there is a way to go step by step and with the right methodologies, explaining or even with gamification. So I'm not saying it's something that you should just accept that, okay, it's a profession which is risk averse or more focused on risks, but I'm not judging or not very disappointed about this specialty of our profession.
So I agree, change management, change is always difficult, no matter the profession. I'm probably a little more judgmental than Andrea, and maybe I feel I'm somewhat entitled to be as a former lawyer and knowing some of the putting myself in those shoes as well and thinking of, what I would be like trying to implement some of this technology as well. And I think the reality is the points that Andrea has made are real in terms of, as hard as behavior changes within any organization, there are some nuances within legal that make it even more difficult to adapt and to bring things in. And I actually, just before this session, I pulled out some notes from a very interesting conference that I attended in Chicago. I've seen a trend in the US with some of the big US firms actually hiring in people with a behavior science and behavior change background. And there was a talk by Julia Montgomery, who's the new Director of Practice Enablement at King & Spalding. And she gave a presentation which actually pulled some data on how lawyers compare to the general population on certain metrics around skepticism, resilience, autonomy. And I pulled out the stats because I thought it was quite interesting at the time. So if you see the general population is like 50% at the 50 mark, when you compare lawyers to that, lawyers are more skeptical. So they rate 90 versus the general population at 50. They're less resilient. So they rate 30 versus the standard 50. And they sit at 89 versus 50 on autonomy. So they're much more autonomous. And I think we do need to keep these kinds of things in mind when we are thinking about how we approach the implementation of technology. And there are different strategies that I'm sure, Andrea, you've come across firsthand with sort of thinking about, how do you engage with one of those partners that you mentioned? And I get it's incredible what they've created and, what they've done, and understandably they're risk averse to doing it, but how do you implement change when that is the mindset and someone is skeptical about something that's coming in? They're not particularly resilient if something doesn't work 100% the first time round. If they're a very autonomous person and they don't want, so I think those are challenges which, we work in partnership with the law firms that we work with, but ultimately, when Andrea was at Denton's, she's the one with her team in-house having to deal with those different personas and get them on board with implementing the change. And it is challenging. You add to the mix that although there's this challenge, no two law firms are the same either. So there are different cultures, and different for a global law firm or for a firm that operates in lots of different countries. You've got further cultural nuances with, how do the Eastern European offices operate versus here in the UK? How does a team in the US operate? Different practice areas, and again, there are different dynamics that are at play, and it's what keeps it interesting, but it does make it very hard to implement. But Andrea, I know you had some great successes with overcoming some of those challenges and actually getting technology implemented. So maybe you can comment on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in connection with leading technology adaptation, change management, you really have to forget all the skills you learned as a lawyer. So if you are a lawyer in this role, you have to have a completely different skill set, not your typical legal skill set. You have to make sure that people understand what you're offering them as much as possible, but change is never a kind of logical, rational exercise. It's more the right brain which works, more emotions, more gamification or play, storytelling. And so I tried different tactics in connection with that. So at Wolftice, for example, we had a platform, a collaboration platform, which we called, so most law firms called it collaborate or connect or something like this. We called it Wolftice Space, and we played with the topic of the universe, the space. We invited for an event someone who talked 90 minutes about the universe, and then we talked 10 minutes about the tool, actually. And then also the tool itself, we didn't say like login on the first screen, but lift off. If you clicked on the help button, the email said, Houston, we have a problem. So we played with it and people loved it. And we even had an internal meeting or like an event where we said the cookies are space cakes. Of course, they were not space cakes. And it worked really well. I knew we are there when one of the more like senior partners called me one day and said, like, if you have a hotline one day, a telephone hotline, maybe the waiting music could be Return of the Space Cowboy from Jamiroquai or something. So and he was a 60+ partner. So I said, yes, even if he plays with, and he, for example, he told me just that's a comment also in connection with age. He told me that he will not use the platform because his work doesn't require to work with the platform, but he will make sure that his team will use the platform. And so yeah, but also in connection with what we did with Legatics is really going partner by partner and explaining and feeling the fears and explaining the functionalities, calling them one by one, asking for 30 minutes. And then, of course, as people started to use it and talked about it between each other, then it was easier to demo for further larger groups. Or with one tool, which was actually a business development or client relationship management tool. And the challenge was whether partners will share their contacts in this CRM, client relationship management tool. I went to one of the rainmakers and went for a lunch with him and explained. So I invested a lot in persuading him and some other rainmakers, because I knew that if I can tell to other partners that Mr. X and Ms. Y has shared his contacts in the system, then it's a easier task. So you can see that there are different tactics. You always have to think like, what is it about? Whether it's better to do a big bang and a lot of noise about it, or whether you have to go one by one, whether you use gamification, storytelling, or something else. It's in connection with law firms. It's also very important to bear in mind that law firms and law firm partners look at other firms, and if you know that some other law firms use the technology, use this information, or even invite best friends of your law firm that they can share their experience. So it's there are different tactics, and it's very interesting as you can hear. It's not easy, but it's a lot of fun to implement tools and roll them out and make people use them.
Thank you. Daniel, do you want to add something or?
No, I think, well, maybe just a small point. I think, no two rollouts are ever the same. You could be, I think as much as maybe what Andrea did at Wolf Tice, if she was at another firm, maybe doing exactly the same thing would not have the same result. And that's certainly one of the challenges on our part. We've seen common themes that have emerged that do lead to successful implementations. And there are certainly, I think there are some core points that have come out that are common denominators across all of our successful implementations. So one that Andrea has mentioned is the role modeling that comes from those partner champions, particularly the big rainmaking partners within the firm. And it can be, I find it hilarious sometimes because they don't even need to use the solution. Like sometimes the simple act of them saying it could be, a 10-second snippet of them saying, we've invested in this solution. This is something we see as important. We want you to use it. And if a senior partner says that at the beginning of a training that we do, we will see immediately people will go back to their desks and they will start using the platform. If they don't turn up or they show that it's not important, then maybe there aren't other incentives for, the other lawyers within the organization. They think, well, this isn't valued by the senior person within the firm, I'm not going to implement it. So that's definitely a theme that we've seen quite commonly. If you don't have that senior buy-in, it's not to say it's impossible, but it is much, much harder to get a successful implementation going. People need to be aware that the tool is out there. So the gamification that Andrea mentioned is a fantastic way to kind of, really in a big way get the awareness out that it's there. But then also, what are you going to do when you then have some of the initial successful, successes? Can you turn that into a case study or success story that can be used to drive even greater awareness within the organization? And, there are some of those things that we've seen have been common denominators, but yeah, it's not a blueprint, unfortunately. It does need to be adapted law firm to law firm and office to office.
And again, I can't emphasize enough that it has to be, you have to start with strategy, because, for example, if you incentivize the lawyers in a way which works against any technology implementation, then you can have the sexiest, whatever, gamification, storytelling combined change management strategy, you will probably not succeed if using the tool is, for example, about being more efficient, and on the other hand, lawyers are incentivized still, how many hours they bill per day. There are still law firms who have this kind of metrics, how many hours you work per day. If this is your key metric, key KPI, then you are not incentivized probably enough to be more efficient. So also it's you have to think about this also in a complex way strategically.
Thank you. That's interesting. And based on what you say, I mean, I cannot say that lawyers are really friendly towards changes, and I cannot say that there is no work in persuading them that legal tech is a good thing. But just for this, maybe to persuade them also, but do you want to say an example where legal tech tool was enhancing efficiency or reduced turnaround time or somehow led to significant gains?
Sure. So the classic example, which we have seen for several years, is document automation. That how many hours you need to create the first drafts in a transaction, for example. And usually clients don't care whether you use technology or not. They want to have the first drafts in like the next day or in 2 days. And then either you have your templates, because document automation doesn't work alone as a technology. You have your templates, which are automated and then can create the first drafts. Or you hire Harry Potter, as I always say, or you can't deliver. So definitely, document automation is one of the examples where you can clearly demonstrate value. The other is all the kind of the matter management, transaction management platforms, and I think Daniel can comment on that. We had a partner who had a signing where 400 documents across several countries, several companies in several countries had to be signed, and some of them signed and some of them reviewed, and so complex. And he said if he had to manage that signing with Excel sheets and email like they used to do it before, for sure they would have made a mistake, or the usual working until 3 a.m. in the morning type of situation. So those are also good examples. Of course, the generative AI tools and also some of the previous generation of AI tools, previous type of AI tools, they bring a lot of value in connection with document review. So also in connection with due diligence type of reviews. But the best example is e-discovery. E-discovery is a topic which is simply not possible to do without technology. Without like only humans would not be able to review those vast amount of data that is usually involved in an e-discovery or internal investigation situation.
So I can comment a little bit from the transaction management perspective and some of what we've seen, but I might also give an example of where new technology doesn't necessarily make you more efficient, and it can like almost add, I wouldn't say greater complexity, but it can create more work. And I think we've seen this, if maybe starting on that, you can sort of see, I think of my dad was a lawyer for several years, and he talks about what it was like when he practiced before they even had computers. And you think you bring in computers and it should make everything far more efficient, but computers and the internet, it's actually just meant deals have become so much more complicated. There's so much more data, there's so much more information, and actually the work, there's been more work to do, not less, in a number of ways. And I think that I'll come back to an example where I think even now with some of the AI solutions, that's the case. But from a transaction management perspective, I think some of the efficiencies that have been reported back to us are around reduction in resourcing that's required on transactions. So a popular use case for Legatics is project financing, large complex deals that often require a number of junior trainees to project management, the collection of documents. One of the major firms that we work with had reported on 2 very similar deals they did 1 year after another, that they actually needed 4 trainees to project manage one of these deals in year 1. And then with Legatics, it went down to 2 trainees, but actually only working 50% of the time. So it was basically 75% reduction in the resourcing required on the deal. We've seen an accelerated time to close, which is an efficiency, but it's also a value add to the client. If you estimate ordinarily it would take 6 months to close one of these deals and you do it in 3 months. If you're doing an offshore wind farm and the legals or compliance issues are the things holding up that generating electricity, there's a huge value to the client in being able to complete that deal, 3 months earlier and in half the time. One of the things that's incredibly painful for junior lawyers is at the end of a transaction, having a transaction Bible or a closing set that's created to memorialize the core documents on a transaction. It's very rarely something that you can recover your time for. So with a transaction management tool like Legatics, being able to do that in minutes, not hours or days, is incredibly impactful. Some of the measures go beyond just the pure efficiency, and it ultimately is to do with efficiency drivers and reducing the write-offs, but might come to a further question where we talk a little bit about ROI, but we have seen people do quite detailed analysis on the impact that it has on gross margin. So one firm did a detailed analysis and actually found it improved gross margin on average by 8% across the deals where they used Legatics. So it's an efficiency driver, but it's ultimately something there that drives, that if you can tell a partner they're going to improve the gross margin by 8% on every deal where they use, Legatics, that's going to get their attention. So we've definitely seen that have an impact. Back to the example though, where maybe it doesn't necessarily create less work. With some of the document review, like the due diligence tools, which help to provide it, ultimately on an M&A deal, I know when we were instructed to do them, you would set a materiality threshold of which and how many documents you ultimately review. And it tends to be a risk discussion that you have between with the client, and ultimately how much money are they willing to spend on lawyers to do the review. So you might agree that the materiality threshold is every document that's worth more than 10 million, you know, as a supply agreement. But what happens for all the other contracts which might, you know, be important? So what we are seeing happens with some firms is they will now be able to offer risk reduction by doing a due diligence maybe on any contract that's between 1 and 10 million with an AI tool. If anything material comes out of that, then maybe they'll get some human eyes on it, and that might be more work that the law firm can charge for. But then they'll still be doing that, get human eyes on any documents that are over 10 million, as an example. So I think it's interesting. I mean, maybe we will evolve fully to the point where everything is put through, and you know, we only do the human eyes over the things that are, you know, fully evolved in that way. But typically what I'm hearing, particularly from the big firms, is that kind of risk reward basis. They still want the human eyes over a lot of the key work. So it doesn't necessarily mean that less work is happening.
Thank you. And we have kind of 8 minutes left, and I don't know if it is okay if we overrun a little bit of our 1 hour. So I would like to encourage the audience to send their questions if they have in the chat or in the Q&A, and then our panelists can answer your questions. Because I myself have a lot of other questions. I would be also interested in the future, that what do you think, which are the legal tech trends which will influence the industry in like 5 years?
I think in 5 years we will still very much talk about generative AI, maybe like agents, agentic AI, maybe even other types of AI technologies that we don't know about today, or which might not even exist today. So definitely it's a very powerful technology, but I would say, and I actually see the next 5 years as less as the focus, I think, should be less on which technology, but how to implement and how to make change happen, how to make adoption happen. So I think the next 5 years is much more about those human sides of the story and the strategic side of the story, and making it or implementing it properly. Sometimes I say, maybe I'm wrong, but sometimes I say that maybe at the end of the day, all law firms will use the same type of technologies, the same toolkit, but basically who makes the most out of those tools, and who has created the best knowledge database to leverage the tools on, and who made the most successful business model adaptation will be the decisive questions.
So I definitely think that a trend over the next 5 years, I've always believed that there will be a tipping point in legal with regards to large-scale adoption. I'm not sure we'll ever get to full-scale adoption, but large-scale adoption of a lot of these tools, where to date, I think there've been, you know, pockets of adoption for a lot of these. I thought maybe, I've been doing this for 8 years with Legatics, I thought maybe we would have reached that already, but I am sensing that there is a shift, and I do think over the next 5 years we will see this sort of exponential growth and adoption of a lot of the tools. I think part of it comes as well with a generational shift. We're seeing some of those, you know, digital native junior lawyers now becoming partners, and they'll become more senior partners, and the trainees who have grown up on some of the tools, frankly now like Legatics, that will just be ingrained in the way in which they operate. So I think part of that will be significant in terms of seeing that happen. The other big trend that I'm starting to see now, and I think will only become more and more important, is the focus on data. And the gold mine that law firms are realizing that they're sitting on, both within the documents themselves, but also the insights that can be gained from better understanding how they're interacting with their clients. You know, getting more granular around you know, who they work with, how valuable some of the work is that they do, which isn't so valuable. And ultimately, you know, law firms are businesses. They, you know, you want to figure out where should you be investing your time and energy, and data is going to be really central to that. So I think we'll probably see more and more of a divide between those law firms that really have a good grasp over their data and those that don't.
Yeah, so both of you were mentioning the human factors and its importance. So what do you think, what skills should the legal professionals cultivate to stay competitive, to stay ahead in the future?
I think they should definitely look beyond legal in terms of skills. So although I'm sure that, so I don't believe that there will be a day where there will be no human lawyers, but maybe or maybe it's not just in my life. So there will be a market for very good, sharp, creative lawyers, I think. But additionally, you should definitely develop your tech skills, which doesn't mean that you have to be an IT person or be able to code. Several years ago, when the whole legal tech kind of wave started, a frequent question was at conferences: will future lawyers be able, or will they have to code? No, it's like really like a little bit of tech affinity you have to develop, and also maybe even more important, you have to understand your own processes and also how the data in your processes kind of moves and transforms. Definitely, I'm optimistic that the more the machines can do, the more time lawyers will have to or will be able to invest in the human relationships, so more client relationship management, more talent management. I think could be the future. So with that, of course, all these people say soft skills should be developed. Sometimes they are harder than other type of skills. So I don't know whether you should call them soft skills. Communication, emotional intelligence, kind of asking the right questions, questioning. Yeah, I think these are the. You can also add project management as a special skill. Some people say design. I think that's very close to kind of putting yourself in the client's shoes, so kind of empathy and emotional intelligence, and also process understanding. So that would be my broad list.
Yeah, I think I'd definitely agree with being curious. I mean, no matter what it is that you're wanting to do, just constantly, being curious about the world, how things are developing. There are, tons of great books and online resources out there about, what's happening within legal technology, webinars like this one. So I'm assuming I'm probably preaching to the converted here because people have made their way to this particular webinar, but, other podcasts, conferences that people can get involved in. I think part of it otherwise probably depends on what people are looking to do professionally. If they want to be a lawyer, thinking about being a lawyer of the future, the reality is the technical skills are still important. So it's more just what are some of those surrounding skills that you will do. And I think you're not trained to realize that as a lawyer, but a lot of what you do early on as a lawyer is a project manager, and I don't think that's going to change. The tools will change in terms of what you do, but that is still going to be quite a bit of what you do as a junior attorney or paralegal within an organization. So those skills are useful. It's then, though, thinking a little more broadly about maybe what other opportunities are there within the law firm and where could my career go and where could it take me. So, thinking of that data theme, if other people agree that is a theme that is going to continue to emerge, data analytics skills, that will be highly sought after within, I know already it is, there are a number of open positions for people with data analytics backgrounds, and they pay very well, just as being an attorney pays well within these law firms. So, I think there's a breadth of skills that will be increasingly valued within law firms. They are already, but will it be increasingly valued within law firms as well? So feel free to think more broadly than purely being a technical lawyer in terms of where your career within the legal profession could take you.
And maybe I would just add that maybe all of us, not only young lawyers and general lawyers, but everyone for the next couple of years and beyond, we need to develop our skill to learn new things, to be, flexible, adaptable, or adapt to new situations. So if there is one most important skill, I would maybe pick actually that one. Yeah.
Thank you. That's super interesting. And I would have so much more questions based on what you're saying, but we are running out of time. And to tell the truth, we already over our time with 2 minutes. But if you don't mind, I don't know how much time you have. I would really like to ask a last question because I know that a lot of people are interested in a career in legal tech. So if you accept, then I would like to ask you to give some advice to these people, to these young law students that are already us who are just out of the university, that what should they learn, how to prepare, how they can land in a career in legal tech. What would be your advice?
I think it's good to, it's okay and maybe even beneficial to start actually your career as a lawyer so that you understand those processes and you understand, because a legal tech career is connecting legal with tech. So you have to understand legal good enough to be able to connect it with tech. And then it's a bit like up to you whether you want to work within a law firm, which is more like to some extent strategic, but again, change management, adoption, project management in connection with those tools, a lot of communications with partners. You want to go maybe to a legal tech company, maybe Daniel, that's more your area. We are talking a lot about law firms, but actually there is a growing market for legal tech professionals for in legal departments. So large companies have already big teams. They call it legal operations usually, and that's also something which is very exciting. My major advice would be: I don't think that this is a job which is defined and there is just one type of legal tech work and there is one type of legal tech activity. It's a very broad area, and even the job title is still like moving. Some people call it legal engineering, some people call it legal tech specialist, and they might understand the same thing behind the same type of tasks.
Yeah, my advice would just be to really think about, what excites you career-wise over the long term. I don't know if it's still the same, but when I was at law school, the holy grail was getting a training contract at one of the, the really big firms. And it almost felt at times, if you didn't get that training contract, that, that you're a failure or you haven't quite made it. And that's absolutely not the case. Like there are so many opportunities within legal, and the careers are also, they're not linear, they go in various different directions. And, we've had people that have come and worked at Legatics and then gone on to get their training contracts later, and then they add something different. We've got people working now who worked at Legatics previously at A&O Sherman, at White & Case, at Hogan Lovells. They've had a tangential career. Some of them, 2 of those are in pure legal roles now. One of them is in an innovation role within, actually 2 of them are in innovations roles, so there are 4 in total. So I think just keep an open mind. There's so much opportunity that's out there. But think about what excites you. I knew pretty early on, you know, the holy grail was to end up with one of those big training contracts, and I got one. And I realized pretty quickly that wasn't going to be a long-term viable career for me because it just didn't fit. I've got peers who did that who absolutely loved it, and they love the technical basis, and they just were focused on, you know, moving up that ladder and you know, becoming a partner and doing that, which is great for them. And in some ways I wish that I was motivated enough just to go down that direction, but there are so many opportunities, and I think it's a really exciting time to be generally within legal. So yeah, keep an open mind to what the opportunities are that are out there and think about what excites you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, what excites you, what you are good at? Because I talk a lot about the project management and communication side of this work, but of course there are many people who are actually very talented in coding, whether full, like real coding or no code, low code tools type of coding. That's also a very exciting field for many, just to close the doors and develop a site, the tool and you in a room. Some people are really good at that and very passionate about that type of legal tech job.
Thank you. Thank you for all the insights and for this super interesting conversation. I really enjoyed it. I hope the audience and you too. And wow, we learned so much about legal tech and a lot of things from you. So thanks a lot again. And I'm just saying to the audience that the Arzboni Legal Fest is continuing the next week. So stay with us. You can see the program on the website of Arzboni. And there will be a lot of interesting conversation also the next week. So looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.